can touch the sky. I think about it every night and day. I spread my wings and fly away. Oh, 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 oh. Let's go. Oh, 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 oh. Sometimes I lay under the moon and thank God I'm breathing. Oh, 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 oh. 'Cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around. One day, all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, that we no more wars and our children will stay. One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day.
Good evening, everyone, or morning, depending on where you are. It's my third day with you. Maybe we'll do that 3 times for the third day, and I'll participate in adding a little bit more light to the world. Although Shraga Batiha Ramai Mahani, the Talmud says, a candle in the middle of the day. What good is that? But anyway, symbolically, it's worth it. I'd also here's another thing we're going to start doing very soon. It's the shofar. And why am I doing it now? Because in 2 days from now, it'll be Rosh Chodesh Elul, and we will blow this every day up until the day before, not including Rosh Hashanah. So let me give it a shot over here. And that's the Jewish wake-up call. It's time to take stock with where we are, where we're holding in our lives, and how we can improve ourselves for the next year. So, at any rate, I just thought I would do that with you. It's a nice ritual, and it's a little bit early, but better earlier than later, or is it better late than not at all? But it doesn't matter. I would like to share one other thing. I realized that when I told my bio over to you, that I did not mention what I'm doing presently, only what I used to be doing. My history, Melissa. However, I'm going to mention some people from Great Neck is Melissa and Leona Sue Thacker. Good evening from Southern Illinois. Thank you. And there's Stephen, but I don't know where he's from because I can't scroll down these comments. So I apologize unless I can get some more of your names in here. I don't know what to do here. Thank you, Brian. Mark Lister, Paula Schmidt, Klaus from Chicago. Hi, how are you? Philip Kaufman from Skokie, Illinois. Old Skokie, and Lucy from Minnesota. Well, welcome. And what did I mean to share with you is the following. What I do presently, I am part of a Jewish court called a Beit Din. This Beit Din is called the Beit Din of North Hollywood. It's been around for a long time. But the Beit Din role can be a number of things. It could be for purpose of adjudicating issues between two people, business law, and the like. It could also be for the purpose of arranging a get, a bill of divorcement for a woman who, and a man and his wife who no longer can stay married. A third purpose is for the purpose of conversion. Now, conversion to Judaism is not an easy thing, as some of you well know. Judaism does not believe that we have to run a membership drive, 15 million Jews or whatever, how many are in the world is hard enough to get, keep going. the reason why we don't have a membership drive, and that's been asked before, this philosophical question, why don't we go out there and try to proselytize people, is because we disingenuine. What do I mean by disingenuine? It would be not true. It would not be true because Judaism does not believe it's my way or the highway, that just one size fits all. If you're born a Jew, you have a certain responsibility. The integrity of the Torah and upholding its mitzvot, that is incumbent upon every Jew. If you want to become a Jew by choice, that's your choice. Nobody's forcing you to do that. That should be something that comes within. An internal light goes off and says, I really belong with the Jewish people for X, Y, and Z reasons. Most of them should, hopefully they should be sincere. We'll see some of the more insincere ones, by the way, by sharing some stories that come out of the Talmud. But really, there's 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach that some of you have been familiar with. These 7 universal laws that could be upheld, and God says, if you do that, you're fine. Why do 613 when you get heaven for 7? We have no monopoly on heaven as Jews. God has conveyed to us through his teachings from Mount Sinai till now that there are different paths, and depending on whether you were born a Jew or you want to become a Jew, and if you do not, you remain a Noahide. That's beautiful. So I wanted to throw out to tell you that it's been a very gratifying 20 years or so involved with conversions, even though I was doing all the other rabbinic things as well. Probably over 300 people have converted through this Beis Din, at least while I was involved with it. And each one is unique. Every one is very special. And it's an amazing trip, and I have this tremendous respect for those who are Jews by choice. So if any of you need more information, are considering this, or want to clarify some things, I'd be more than happy for you to address any of the questions that you may pose through this forum, or through my email address, which is ravparry@yahoo.com. I normally answer them pretty punctually. So today, which is the 28th day of the month of Av, Menachem Av, is a yahrzeit. Now, a yahrzeit means the anniversary of someone's death, and that man happens to be Rav Avraham Yeshaya Pam HaKohen, Rebbe Umori. He happens to be my Rebbe, where I got my smicha from. He was a king among men. I will get back to this a little later. Actually, you'll see how his life and his personality is related to the topic for today, which is Hillel. Hillel Hazake, the elder Hillel, who is the spiritual father of the house of Hillel. And since it's been mentioned here before, whether or not the bat kol or no bat kol, we said the halacha is like Hillel over Shammai, Beit Hillel over Beit Shammai, the house of Hillel over the house of Shammai. The question now comes up, why? In essence, why is it because of the majority? Is that simple? Is just the automatic, default answer is because he was the majority, that house is a majority among the Jewish people of scholars, that's it? I mean, Shammai, as I mentioned before, Tosfos brings us out, were charifei tfei. They were even sharper scholars. They were in the minority, but they were. If you go look at scholarship, maybe we should have gone after them because of the plethora of knowledge that came from the house of Shammai. So here is a balancing act that, in the end, we learned that indeed it's the majority of scholars. But it still begs the question. I don't know how this would work, because I think there's a set number that you're allowed to have on your roster in the MLB, a 40-man roster, a 26-man, whatever it happens to be. So what if some roster only has 30 men, but they're that's great players. They're a murderer's row lineup of hitters, and against a team that has 40 players to put out there on the field, but they're not as good. So what that they have majority, have more players? That's not going to win the game for you necessarily. It's skill and other factors that go into it. It's just a hypothetical question. Obviously, it doesn't come. Every team, I guess, has the same amount of players, but you can understand what I'm getting at. So there has to be some underlying reason, deeper reason, why the house of Hillel won out, and that had a lot of ramifications too throughout history, because there were different temperaments and a whole different attitude that went into the school of Hillel as opposed to that of Shammai. To understand this, I'm going to share with you certain passages, insights for the Talmud itself, and there we'll get a grasp of why we hold according to Beit Hillel and how profound it is that we do. Before I get there, I do want to at least mention something on the daf, on daf tet. We are in Eruvin, and at the top of the page, the following issue is brought up. In very the beginning, what if you have a Koreh, which is meshucha? Meshucha means it's drawn away from the side of the wall. In other words, somebody maybe took another peg and just like a T shape, stuck this into the ground, and it's sitting in the middle between one wall of the mavoi and to the other of the mavoi, but it doesn't come to the end. What do you do about that? Or it's sitting, the cross, not the crossbeam, but the lechi is sitting, but it's not. It's also been drawn into the ground, but it's not exactly touching the wall. What then? What is the law about that? So, the interesting Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, it says, when Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is the great grandson of Hillel, by the way, that as long as the stick would be within, let's say, look at it this way, when it's upright in a vertical position, it's within 4 tefachim or 4 handbreadths to the wall, we say lavud. We apply the principle of connecting, or lavud, the space in between, and it's considered as if it's all filled in. So in essence, there's no gap anymore because of this principle of lavud. Where does lavud come from? It's a halacha l'Moshe mi Sinai. It's another legal concept that is attributed to Moses at Mount Sinai. But it's applied here and also applied in another case. It's applied in the case of sukkah. A sukkah needs to have 2 walls plus a little bit of a third wall. Let's say you have 2, conventional walls, forming a 45-degree angle like this. Or is it a 90-degree angle? And you need to have a third wall to sit in that sukkah. You have to at least have 7 tefachim or 7 handbreadths wide. And it has to be 10 tefachim high. We've learned about this before as well. Approximately 36 inches, I suppose. 40 inches. So if you have this structure and you need to put a third wall, you don't have to put it up against the wall, the other wall, flush. Even if it's sitting within 3 tefachim, according to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, 4 tefachim, but we don't hold according to him. It's 3 tefachim to that wall. That's also considered enclosed, and all the wall this piece has to be is like a 2x4. Technically, it doesn't have to be a conventional wall. It could be a beam, and as long as it's at 3 tefachim within, it's considered as if it's all filled in. And now you have 4 tefachim of wall, let's say, and that's a majority of 7. And it's considered you have 3 walls that are either literally or figuratively 7 tefachim wide, and that you have a kosher sukkah. So both in the regards to an eruv, or making this lechi v'koreh, forming a imaginary wall, and also by sukkah we apply this principle. One thing I left out though is because here it says meshucha v'tuluya. Tuluya, the example I was giving again, is that kind of it's suspended here, but what if it doesn't reach the ground? In other words, it's suspended. I've left that part out. It doesn't reach the ground. This pole, it's just hanging up somehow on either side over here on the top. So it's not. This is just suspended. It's a suspended mechitza. As long as it's within 3 tefachim of the ground, the bottom of that beam or wall, or in this case for a lechi, it's considered like it's on the ground also. It's chavut. It's called chavut to basically close up the bottom as if it's filled in also. So in other words, this 3 tefachim gap that you might have from the ground to the bottom of this either pole or a wall, we call that also a form of lavud, but it's called chavut, which is a form of lavud. So basically, why was it 3 tefachim? The Mishnah in Sukkah tells us it's because it has to be at least close enough to the ground that a gedi, the smallest domestic animal, basically can't scurry under that mechitza, that partition that is hanging and not yet reaching the ground. Why so? I don't know. It's a good question. Why it has to be that size connected to a goat per se, and not a chicken or another farm animal? I don't know. He hasn't made, so there is a way of applying either lavud or chavut, these two words, in order to fill in a gap when in the structure of either the lechi that you're or the Koreh not reaching, the either wall of the mavoy. This is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, a law treated with Moses and Sinai to be able to consider all filled in as long as it's within a certain proximity to the wall or the ground. Okay, so that I just wanted to share concerning what the innovation that the Talmud comes up with in order to kind of remedy a scenario where it's not ideal. So I'm going to put that aside, and then we're getting back to Hillel. So where do we see the personality of the Hillel the Zaken or Shammai the Zaken come up? Some of you are going to raise your hand and say, Rabbi Parry, yeah, we had that in Sukkah, on page 31 and 32. Not Sukkah, Shabbat, the Masechet Shabbos. So let's go take a look again. So what do we have over here? We have three stories of three Gentiles who came before both Shammai and Hillel and in different scenarios and asked to be converted. In one of them, the more famous of the three stories, one of them said to Shammai, convert me on 1 foot. Convert me to Jews on 1 foot. So it is said that he took some kind of tool that he had, because it seems to be Shammai was a carpenter, and he kind of escorted him out the door. Hillel, on the other hand, took him in and said the famous line, Mai desane lach lo savi lechavrach. The rest of it is commentary, go learn. He said, that what is hateful to you, don't do to your friend. The rest of it is commentary, go and learn. So be it. Another incident occurred after this one. Convert me on. I'm sorry. Let me start to explain the story. This is the story where this erstwhile or non-Jew was passing by the study house, and he heard that they were learning, or one of the teachers expounding, and these are the garments that the Kohen Gadol should wear. He has a choshen, a breastplate, and an ephod, and a robe, and a tunic, and all these beautiful garments. And the Gentiles said, wow, these garments, for whom are they designated? And the student said to him, that's for the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. The Gentile said to him, I will go convert so that I will be installed as the high priest. I'll become the Kohen Gadol. He came before Shammai and said, convert me on the condition that you'll make me the high priest. He took out his builder's cubit again, or his stick, and he escorted him out the door. He came before Hillel and asked to be converted. And Hillel said to him, let me ask you, is it not the way of the world that one who knows the protocols of royalty is appointed to be the king? Go and learn about all these protocols that malchut, that kingship, in Judaism involves. In other words, engage in learning Torah. He went, he started reading his Bible and then the Torah. He reached the part where it says Hazar hakarev yumat, and the commoner who approaches to wear these garments to serve yumat, he'll die. He said, oh my goodness, who is this speaking about? And Hillel told him, he says, even King David, who doesn't come from the house of Levi, from the tribe of Levi, and he puts on these garments, he would die because he's from Yehuda, and only those who are from Levi, and not all Levi, because it has to be from Aaron, a Kohen, and his descendants are allowed to wear these. So he said to himself, this Gentile, he says, wow, Israel is called my firstborn. And about them it says, and a commoner who tries to draw close will be put to death. Wow, me as a convert, even the more so. So, I who am I, to do this? But he was vigilant and continued learning, and he converted as well. Now, the third one had an interesting thing. He said, convert me on condition that I will keep the Torah law, only Torah Shabbat, the written law, and not the Talmud or the oral tradition. Shammai on cue, took his stick, and he escorted him out the door. Hillel, however, said, let me give you your first lesson. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. That's your first lesson. Now go practice that and come back to me for your next lesson. It says, oh, that seems simple enough. All day and all night, he was saying Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, and Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. Then he came back to Hillel and says, I'm ready for my next lesson. Says, do you remember the first one? He said, yes, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. He says, no, it's Beis, Gimel, Aleph, Daled. Whoa, wait. You told me yesterday Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. And now you're telling me it's a different order? He looked at him, he said, well, you're relying on me, and I'm part of the oral tradition. So if you're trusting me for even the simple lesson of Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled, it's going to stand to reason that there's going to be more to the tradition about how to become a Jew and how to practice. This stuck with him, this lesson, and he's also stuck it out to the end and converted. Then the Talmud says that, and this is the reason why I'm bringing up these stories. The Talmud says that eventually the three converts gathered together. They met each other in one place, and they said, Shammai's impatience sought to drive us from the world. The Hillel, hevi otanu tachat kanfei hashchina. But Hillel, because of his patience with all of us, with all our demands and all our assumptions and whatever they were, my desire to be a Kohen Gadol, because I figured if I wanted to become Jewish, I would want to get to the top. And this one who said, I want to just learn it quickly and on one foot. But Hillel's patience won the day and brought these three people to the faith of Judaism. Apparently that was their fate. That's where they belonged. And because of Hillel, they were able to make that transition. It's a very interesting thing. Was Shammai wrong or technically? Because isn't there a concept in Judaism that we're supposed to discourage the convert to convert the first time, second time, third? In fact, we learned this from the story of Ruth and Naomi. Naomi, of course, is the mother-in-law of Ruth, the biblical Ruth, or we call her Ruth. And she attempted to not reject her, but at least to, say, you stay here in Moab. I'm going to go back to, Beit Lechem Yehuda, where my origins are, but I'm nothing. I'm poor. I lost my husband and my two sons. And she persisted. And after she saw that she persisted, Ruth was sincere, then she just laid off and said, you're coming with me. So there is a concept like that. But Shammai's attitude, his lack of patience, seemed to have been what discouraged all three of these. And perhaps I saw a notion about this in a different context. People have different temperaments, and they're born that way. It's the Chassam Sofer. That's where I saw this. In the teaching of the Chassam Sofer, you might have to look him up if you want to know. He lived in Pressburg 150 years ago. And he says that there's a phenomenon that wise and intelligent people sometimes act rationally, for the most part, but they have a weak spot. For some people, for instance, it's in matters of money. They seem to be very agreeable with that, discussing what music you should listen to or what restaurants you go to eat. But when it comes to a transaction, they just kind of lose it, They almost like, wow, there's another person over here, But nonetheless, that's what causes them to be blinded. For another, it's food, binging on unhealthy foods and stuff like that. That's their soft sore spot. And yet, and we're talking about tzaddikim too. When it comes to honor, respect, being recognized and the like. We see that in Pirkei Avos it says, Kol harodef min hakavod, achrei hakavod borechet mimenu. One who pursues honor, this honor seems to flee them. And other people, they just lose it. Jealousy is another one. And so Shammai had a certain temperament for the absolute truth. It's either this way or it can't be any other way. And people coming to him with demands seem to have ticked him off a little bit, and so he maybe overreacted. Hillel had a different temperament, and perhaps this is the reason why the halacha is like Hillel, or the house of Hillel, is because of his patience. It is said that they were nochim v'sovlim. They were easygoing, the students of Hillel, and they were patient, and in fact overlooked other people's foibles and demands and unreasonableness and stuff like that. They just let it go. And as a result of that, they were able to see somebody else's position. In fact, they oftentimes they debated Shammai's position before they advanced their own opinion. This is a great midah. This is what we call the midah, or characteristic, a quality. The quality of savlanut, of patience, of acceptance, and non-judgmentalism. It's a reward for that is we see that these three people came tachat Shechina, and they were able to flourish as Jews among the Jewish people. I'll say something more about this as well, because there's another story that illustrates just how far Hillel went to be patient. You might remember the story as well, because it was also in the tractate Shabbat, if not mistaken, around the same area. So a person came, to his friend and made a wager. He said, "I wager you 400 zuz that I can get Hillel angry." Okay, sounds like a good wager. So he chose one Friday afternoon. You know what happens Friday afternoon in a good Jewish home? Everybody's preparing for Shabbat. Hillel was no exception, and it was said that he was washing his hair or something in preparation for Shabbos. So this person didn't knock on the door, passed by the door of Hillel's house. Mikan Hillel, is there Hillel here? Didn't call him Rabbi Hillel, even though he wasn't known as Rabbi Hillel. Hillel was like he didn't even need the title Rabbi. He was so great. Not because he thought he was great, as you can see. At any rate, he was the Nasi of the Jewish people, after all. He was the prince of the Jewish people. So he put on his robe, and he came out to ask, "My son, how can I help you?" So he said, "I have a question to ask you. Why are the heads of the Babylonians tend to be so round?" Okay. So that you need to ask me like Friday afternoon just before candle lighting or something like that. He didn't say those words, and he was totally calm. He says, "It's a very good question. It's because their midwives are not so skilled. So the heads come out a little bit misshaped." Okay. So then a few minutes passed, and he left, and he came back he knocked on the door. "Hillel, is Hillel here?" The same impudent way that he did the first time. And he said, "I'd like to ask you a question. Is it okay? Why are the people of Tadmor have leering, their eyes are very leery?" In this case, I looked up the word leery here. And I think it means they tend to be very dry and stuff like that. There's other translations for leery, but that was the one I found. And so he answered back, and he said, "That's a very good question, because they live in the desert. It's very sandy, and they can't protect their eyes so well, so their eyes tend to tear a lot, and they get very red, and etc., etc." Well, thank you. So he left again, and he had a third shot at this, and he comes and says, "Is Hillel here? Is Hillel here?" Again, Hillel patiently put his robe on, came to the door, and said, "Yes, my son, what do you..." Now, by now, most normal people would have said, "Oh, you get the heck out of here. Don't talk to me now. Come, ask somebody else." Hillel looked at him and says, "Yes, what do you have to ask?" And he says, "Why is it that some Africans have very broad feet?" Because they live also in the desert, and they have to go to difficult places. They're on barefoot and stuff like that. So they've developed an adaptation to this. He threw up his hands and he said, "May there not increase any more Hillels in the Jewish people." I said, "Why, my son?" He says, "Because you made me lose 400 zuz. Now, that's a lot of money. 200 zuz is a typical wages for a person. 2 years of wages he lost because he couldn't get Hillel angry." So Hillel answered the famous answer. He said, "You know what? You should lose 400 and another 400, that Hillel should never get madder, should not lose his temper no matter what." So it's very interesting question that could be asked over here. What would Hillel... he wouldn't gain anything personally, and it was worthwhile for the person to lose another 400 zuz, not to become angry. What benefit would that additional 400 zuz be worth for Hillel to remain calm? It's like is it all about money? I mean, he was making a point, obviously. The answer is that he had to set an example. He went to an extreme. And he felt that since people look up to me, that he understood his value. By the way, he was a very humble person, but because he understood his value, he made himself even humbler. That he needed to show that I have to control myself. I can't let go, even if I have a tendency. Remember, each one of us is born with a certain tendency towards one extreme or another extreme. And Kohanim are passionate people. Not that Hillel was a Kohen per se, but the idea is that he was the Rosh. He was the Nasi of the Jewish people. Being a Nasi or prince of the Jewish people, he had to act beyond any suggestion of impropriety in everything he did. Again, it shows an extreme patience that he had. And this type of patience lends itself to becoming a good listener and a good renderer of decisions. So there's another point I wanted to share. It could be the brighter and the sharper win the day. Nice guys finish last is the old adage. In Judaism, that's not the case. The nice guy is actually very beloved in the eyes of God, and God imbues them with special siyata d'shmaya, or help of heaven, if you will, like a sixth dimension that they have to be able to do the right thing. There's a Talmudic passage I remember I think it's the end of Tractate Pesachim, and there it says that Shlosha Kadosh Baruch Hu Ohavam, 3 people God particularly loves. Ha'ani, ha'machzer aveda la'asher, a poor person who returns a lost object to a wealthy one. Wow, and think of that. Here he finds $1,000 in the street, and there's an address or an identification in the wallet, and nobody can really know necessarily, and he goes right back and he returns that. That's like an incredible thing. Money would justify and say in those circumstances, wow, what's $1,000 to that guy? Now this could pull me out of poverty. The second one that Kadosh Baruch Hu loves is a rava kadar be'ir ve'eino choite, a single person who lives in the city and doesn't sin. With all his passions, he's on it by himself. He has integrity, self-integrity, his special sanctity that he maintains in order not to, God forbid, do an improper act. And finally, a third person is a person who is maver al midotav, a person who is, by self-examination, overlooks any slights against him. This person is living on a level of amunah, of faith, that's beyond the ken of most individuals. This person like, wow, they can insult him, they can slap him in the face, they could sully his name or cross him up in any which way, and it's like water on the back of a duck. It's like it didn't happen. To do that is extraordinary. It's like if you can imagine, I think I heard this example used before, that if somebody is taking a stick to the dog, and I don't know, you shouldn't do that, but someone is prodding a horse or a dog, so the dog is going to bark at the stick or attack the stick. But really the one wielding it is the person. They will attack the person too. But the instinct is that, like the immediate thing is who's aggravating me. But a person who realizes that this encounter with this other person really came from above, that there was a reason for me to have this encounter, and there's a reason for me to be tested right now, and yet the person overlooks things. God overlooks, therefore, that own person's faults. That individual who may be working on something and has, a soft spot, has a weakness, and has stumbled in certain things, but that a person goes beyond and his mido trump whatever instincts that they might have, this positive attribute, it ends arguments too. It tends to, when it's a step down and a person doesn't take insults personally and the like, it allows us to avoid insults. And that's why a person like Hillel, who didn't take anything personal for this guy coming to Erev Shabbos, I might have, but this person coming the eve of Shabbat and chepping him and asking him, irrelevant questions, it's because he saw the bigger picture. He had probably transformed his very nature into one that was the sublime, godly person who isn't bothered by petty things. So that's what he was unparalleled. Granted, he was probably an exception to the rule, but it doesn't. In this case, that type of personality is one that has a broad mind, has an open mind, is a patient, non-judgmental personality, which plays very well when it comes to deciding what Jewish law, how we should practice, where we should follow. And those students who came after Hillel and saw Hillel, or the few generations after Hillel, remember he lived before the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. He was just a prince of amongst people, literally and figuratively. I'll share something else with you about Hillel. By the way, that actually bolsters this idea is that Hillel did not start learning with a silver spoon in his hand or mouth, whatever the expression is. He was very poor. He came from a very poor stock. And in fact, he was from the students of Shammai v'Avtalion. Shammai v'Avtalion, if you look in the first chapter of Pirkei Avos, you see that there are zugot. There are these pairs. These pairs of, one was the Av Beis Din, the other one was the Nasi. Either way, if you look in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers in the first chapter, you'll find that Hillel emanated from these two schools. Shammai and Avtalion, if I'm not mistaken, were also from Gerim, as a matter of fact. But anyway, be as it may, so the Hillel that comes is very poor, and the story is told that he earned a zuz, and half of it he would use to support his family. The other half he had to pay to get into the Beit Midrash. It was winter, and sometimes he lived in Jerusalem for a good part of his life. He was in the Jerusalem winters can be pretty brutal sometimes. It can snow. I've been there. I lived there, and it snowed. So he couldn't get in because for that day he gave the other half of zuz he gave to charity, and so he was left without anything. He says, "Why I should withhold myself from coming to learn in the house of Shammai v'Avtalion because I don't have any money." So he went up to the rafters, to the roof, and they're like, there was a little opening over there, and he could incline his ear, and he listened that way on the roof. He was so entranced and connected to the teaching, he didn't realize the snow was piling on top of him. And only because something came through from the raft, someone saw something above, did they come up and brush the snow off of Hillel and revive him. An incredible amount of mind over matter had to go for him to be able to overcome the elements and study Torah. A person who does that and doesn't regard other luxuries and niceties and stuff like that becomes a prince of the Torah. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, ala arts tishan, you should be committed to sleeping even on some straw on the ground, b'mayim tishta, b'mayim meshua tishta, water by measure, and a little bit of bread and salt, and such was the life of many of these scholars. They didn't bemoan it. They developed their gentleness and their kindness and their humbleness because they were humble. They came from humble stock. So this is another attribute of Hillel. Hillel also is famous for having said that the statement, if imanili mili vanila asme miani im lo akshav emasai. If I'm for myself, who am I? And if I'm not, though, on the other hand, to be myself, then what is my existence? And he said also that im lo akshav ematai. If not now, when? He's very much a person who was spent his time in the moment. His mind was right there on the task at hand, and this was another attribute that is found in a leader, that they are focused on what needs to be done. And I promised you that I would go back to a person who embodied everything that I was talking about Hillel, Rabbi Aaron Parry, my own teacher. His name was Avram Yeshaya Pam. He eventually became the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das in Brooklyn. This is a famous yeshiva, Ad Yom Hazeh. It's one of the major ones, in fact, in Brooklyn. He started out as appointed as a Talmud lecturer, basically, in 1939. He and his wife, however, became renowned. They were very attracted to this couple. They're very very humble and kind people. He had the kindest eyes. Anybody who saw this person, he was always with a smile and very empathetic. He was incredibly sensitive to people's needs. In fact, one time, one of his students was caught learning math during the Talmud lesson. as a high school student, he was afraid. He explained to the Rebbe, like, I'm going to fail this test if I don't get it right. I'm really apologize for doing it right now, but I'm very nervous about it. He didn't take any slight to this. Rabbi Palm instead told the boy to come to see him afterwards, after class. After the class was over, he says, let's go through the lesson. What are you learning? Algebra? Geometry? Whatever? He happens to be he was brilliant in these areas of mathematics, so it was part of his expertise. He said, I'll share it with you. Another story that comes up about his patience, toward the end of his life, he was suffering from cancer, and the treatments were debilitating to him. And he said to his wife, I'm going upstairs and I'm not sure if I'll be able to come down, for dinner. Someone knocked on the door. It was someone that a week earlier had been asked for a letter and needed the rabbi's signature, and the rabbi would write his letters by hand. He did not use a typewriter or a word processor or anything like that. And he was the Rebbitzin didn't know what to do. So she went upstairs and told the rabbi what it was. Oh, I forgot all about that. He was so, with all the ounce of strength that he had left in him, he came down and he wrote the letter and he signed it. He even apologized. This was like an incredible. He didn't have to do that, but this is how leaders are. Another time, he put his hat. He wore a hat and coat like most Rosh Hashivas, and there was a coat room, and someone had haphazardly put a mug next to his hat. And he didn't see it. And when he took the hat off, the mug came tumbling down and shattered. So he went out and tried to, first he swept up the shards himself and threw them away. And then he went out to one of the stores and tried to find a mug that looked just like this one. And he came with a close one. And he wrote a letter and he put it on the mug and he says, I'm sorry I was negligent and I shattered your mug. I bought this one to replace it. I hope that you forgive me for this. In the event that the replacement doesn't suffice, please contact me as soon as possible to arrange for compensation. I mean, who does these types of things? But he's a leader. He's a rabbi. He taught by example. This person actually took the letter he forgot about the mug. He took the letter and he put it up he framed it and put it up on his wall. He said that was far more important than the mug itself. I had my own personal experience with coming to him for Passover in the 1980s, as I was a student of his. So I came to his house and he greeted me. It was in the intermediate days of Passover. And instead of his wife serving the meal, he served it the whole thing, and including taking the dishes back into. I was like so uncomfortable. My wife and I were like, what do we do? Do we sit here? I got up. He insisted, no, I'm going to do it myself. When it was time to leave, I had my 1973 Dodge Dart rambling down the street, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and he did not leave the porch. He had escorted us out until we were out of eyeshot. It was incredible. I mean, just this personality that is a quintessential humble man. He was always accommodating to others. He felt their pain. One time, I think someone came to him. I heard the story firsthand, and he needed to raise some money for a certain cause, and the Rosh Hashiva, the Rev Pam, had already called certain numbers for a different cause, and he said, "I just can't call the same people at the second time. I just can't bring myself to do it. It's improper. So how much do you need?" And he took out from his own resources and he gave it to him. So he was like very grateful, and it wasn't the entire amount, but then he left, and this petitioner had forgotten something in the house of Rav Pam, so he came back, and when he came back, he saw Rav Pam sitting at his table, and he was crying, and I said, "Did I insult you?" And no, I'm just sorry I couldn't do everything that that you needed, and that was the type of person he was. This kind of heart, empathetic person who said no to anyone. This is a Hillel type of a person. So if you wondered what the question issued was, where and how and why do we go according to the house of Hillel? It's because of their father, their ancestor, the Hillel himself. Divine service is not a 24/6 job or 24/7 job. It is an all-encompassing job. I guess that would cover every living moment. They exceeded beyond any expectations, and because of their greatness, we follow their advice, and we follow their instruction, and we follow their advice for how to live a successful life, spiritually, physically, and in every way, shape, and form. thank you again for your attention these last 3 days. Hope I haven't overburdened you. And again, if anybody wishes to reach me privately, it's ravparry@yahoo.com. Yehudit Sobel. Hi, hello, Rabbi. I bought your book yesterday. Can't wait to receive it on Friday. Okay, thank you. I hope you'll find something worth reading in there. Mark Price. As a non-Jew, I have always had the utmost respect for non-proselytizing stance of Judaism. That's correct. It is the only form of monotheism which is gentle enough to suggest the laws of Noah are enough to get people through. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm just the messenger. That this is the consistent position of most of traditional Judaism is not to proselytize. There's the part of what I was discussing and sharing about Hillel and Rav Pa, my teachers, that really one of the reasons why the Jewish people were sent into exile, and not in one place. We could have just been exiled, say, to the east, but we're, after the destruction of the temple, on every continent. I don't know, Antarctica, I'm not sure. But anyway, but the question is why? The Talmud discusses this too. And it says in Kedushin, Tractate Kedushin, you'll get to it eventually if you stick around for Daf Yomi. It says, Lo galu avotenu la'arba kanfot ha'aret el kadesh yasvu alehem gerim. We weren't exiled to the four corners except that non-Jews should latch on to the Jewish people. Wait, I just said we don't proselytize. This is not what the Talmud means. It means that there are sparks that were lost within the klipa. There's holy sparks of souls that through this galut, through this exile that we've been experiencing, have been mixed up, so to speak, and into different forms. And some aha moment occurs to a person, let's say a Gentile, who sees Judaism practiced or sees an individual who does noble things, and some light goes off in them. The same Talmudic passage says that person who eventually converts is because their soul was always Jewish. Their origin of that soul was a Jewish soul. And they're just being reunited with their source. This is a remarkable passage. Again, it's in the Tractate Kedushin. I forget exactly which page it's on. But this is the explanation to it. So we're subtle. And I know there are a couple of other faiths that actually do this, don't try to proselytize. And some that do. But I'm glad you, Mark, acknowledged this. I think that, there's one more or two more. Thank you, Rabbi. How does a person with the temperament of Shammai become more like Hillel? Wow. Go to a chacham, go to a wise person, and have them analyze you a little bit. Be prepared for some very eye-opening self-awareness with that encounter, and you will find where you have to go. So the Rambam, Maimonides, always suggests one take the middle road in all of our characteristics, not to be too tight-fisted and not to be too frivolous with our giving away our money, not to be like a doormat, but also not to be easy to anger, but find somewhere in the middle. But if a person has a temperament that is to one extreme, sometimes they have to go to the other extreme to compensate for it until they can get back to the golden mean. That might be an answer to your question as well, but you have to be very honest with yourself with how that temperament is and what you can do to go the opposite until you can get back to the middle. Von Billow, I was told by a friend you gave a email for people who have questions about converting to Judaism. Yes, I did. It's Rav Parry, RAVPARRY, at yahoo.com. Again, this is for the serious inquiries. I'm not throwing it out there as if to say everybody should contact me, because it would be inconsistent with my own beliefs and the beliefs of traditional Judaism. Okay, thank you for all your questions and your feedback. And if you want to, if you do buy the book, just remember it says the Complete Idiot's Guide to the Talmud. You're not an idiot. It's a marketing tool. Maybe the one who wrote it is an idiot. I don't know, but God forbid. But I would appreciate your feedback. There's a second one as well, the Complete Idiot's Guide to Hebrew Scriptures. It flopped more or less. It's easier. It didn't make too much. I didn't sell too many of those, but it's available on Amazon as well. And that really goes to the 24 books of the Tanakh of the Jewish Bible, and you might find something